Coming up today on LinkedIn News Live. The global unemployment crisis is affecting the most vulnerable working populations, and we may have already hit a ceiling on recovery. We break down the numbers with our chief economist. Then we speak with one expert on the best way to take your skill set and transfer it into a new job or a new career altogether. That and your comments coming up next. Hello, I'm Caroline Fairchild, and welcome to LinkedIn News Live, where the business conversation begins with you. It's October 29th, and here's a quick look at the top stories that are trending right now on LinkedIn. U.S. GDP grew at a record pace the past 3 months, but the U.S. economy is still smaller than it was before COVID-19. The economy grew 33.1% in the third quarter as businesses reopened and people started to shop again. Even with the big gain, we are still 3.5% behind the GDP level seen at the end of last year. Still, worker confidence is growing. LinkedIn's Workforce Confidence Index measures how Americans are feeling about their job security, and it's the highest it's been since April. The upturn is likely due to stronger gains in jobs amongst the healthcare, media, and entertainment industries. And if you're feeling lonely, you're not alone. After 8 months of millions of people working from home, Bloomberg reported an uptick in loneliness among American workers. The issue is most prevalent amongst extroverts and leaders who genuinely enjoy being with their coworkers. For more stories like these, be sure to check out the news module to the right of your LinkedIn feed, or if you're in mobile, click into that search box. We are facing a global unemployment crisis that we haven't seen since the Great Depression. Microsoft, LinkedIn's parent company, estimates by the year's end, 250 million jobs could be lost, many belonging to the most vulnerable members of the workforce. Joining us now to break down the numbers is Karen Kimbrough. She's LinkedIn's chief economist. Karen, as always, great to have you on LinkedIn News Live.
Hey, Caroline, thanks for having me.
Okay, let's break down the data. The most vulnerable workers are being hardest hit by this crisis. What are we seeing both on and off LinkedIn?
Sure, that's absolutely right. I mean, there are a lot of different groups that are vulnerable, but generally everybody is feeling the brunt of this, enormous labor market crisis we've had. Our unemployment rate here in the US has been improving. It's declined now to about 7.9%. But that number is actually masking a lot of struggle that's still happening for a lot of workers. So, for example, there are a lot of workers that have actually given up and stopped looking. They've essentially left the labor market. And if they were still looking, our unemployment rate would actually be higher than it is right now. But these people have been a little bit discouraged and they've kind of pulled themselves out. And in particular, we're seeing a lot of women do that. Nearly 90% of the people that left the labor force in September were women. So it wasn't that 90% of women left, but of the people who left, 90% of them were women. So a lot of women are pulling back. A lot of young people aged 16 to 24 are also struggling to find employment. So it's a tough time for a lot of people. And if you don't have exactly the right skill set, it can be really tricky to find your next play.
Absolutely. And we know that women are facing the brunt of this crisis. We've seen that and we've discussed this since March. Is that getting any better? We talk about women pulling back. The numbers in September were astonishing, but are there any bright spots there?
I wish I could point to some. I don't think they are there yet. I think the bright spots will come for when two things happen, or maybe three. One, of course, when we have a vaccine that's widely available and distributed, that will help everybody. Two, when a lot of the sectors, the service sectors, hospitality, entertainment, travel, retail, really fully come back, that's when a lot of jobs will reopen. And those jobs are, it's labor intensive, those sectors. So those jobs will hire a lot of women, a lot of young people. And so we're looking for those sectors to really bounce back, and they have not yet fully bounced back. And the third thing that I think we're looking for that would help women a lot would be to have schools fully reopened. And again, that's tied to the vaccine and getting ahead of the pandemic. But once schools are open, I think it gives women more freedom to make choices that are for themselves and not, optimizing for their families.
You mentioned a bounce back in some sectors that we're seeing now, and that's reflected in the GDP numbers that were announced this morning. But Karen, economists like you are not popping champagne bottles because of these numbers. Why is this growth not great for the economy?
Yeah, I mean, this growth that we had is eye-popping, however you look at it. As you said, it's 33% annualized growth in that last quarter. So we're looking in the rearview mirror, remember, in sort of non-annualized numbers, just how much we grow that quarter. It's a little over 7%. That's fantastic, phenomenal. But we need momentum to keep going, and we don't see the momentum in the economy. If anything, we're probably going to continue to grow. The recovery will continue, but at a much slower pace. And so going forward, I think it's going to be a struggle to kind of get everybody back into the labor market, see growth across all sectors of the economy, and really start to lift economic activity. And what you need, Caroline, for that is going to be a sense that people are not just out there spending, but they're working. We need people to be working so they can earn income. And then once they earn income, they will, of course, spend it on whatever the things they want, either things they need or things they like. And that is what's going to lift the aggregate level of activity that we don't have right now in our economy.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and say hello to some members who are joining us in the stream, Karen. We have Kelly from Florida, Devo from Long Island, Leonard from Nashville, Carol from Canada, and Cynthia from Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us on LinkedIn News Live. All right, Karen, we've talked about the doom and gloom, but there's got to be opportunities, right? What jobs are being created during this pandemic? What are we seeing on LinkedIn?
So there absolutely are opportunities, and it's Caroline, it's kind of tough to ask an economist to be optimistic, but I'm going to try. There are millions of jobs available right now on LinkedIn. And a lot of them are actually, they're really accessible. We've done a lot of work to try to think about how can we help people navigate for that next play. And a lot of what we're focused on is skills. Do you have skills that let you port around from one career path to another? How can you find the right jobs? And, there are lots of jobs. There's digital marketing, data analyst, IT specialist, sales representative. A lot of these jobs do not require 4-year degrees. A lot of these jobs may only require 1 or 2 additional skills that you already have. And we're, opening up a lot of LinkedIn learning courses to help people specifically train up for these jobs that we know are available and sustainable and pay, a living wage. So overall, we're actually pretty optimistic that we can try to help millions of people if we can, reskill, upskill, and find that next role.
And for those in the stream right now who are looking to do just that, where do you start? You mentioned LinkedIn courses, but in terms of what skills are in demand right now, what are we seeing in terms of transferable skills that perhaps people in the stream don't even know that they have right now?
Yeah. So here's the good news. When people talk about the future of work, it's often a lot of fear invested in that around, the machines are taking my job or my job's being outsourced. And those are real things that have happened. I don't want to discount that. But the future of work, as far as we can see in our data, is definitely digital, but it's people with digital skills. So the future of work is digital and it's human. And so to the extent that people can acquire digital skills, and by that I mean basic digital fluency, digital literacy, the idea that you're familiar with the tools to do video chat, or you're able to use the software that's appropriate for your role. I don't mean you have to code it, just use it and navigate, the internet. A lot of those digital literacy skills are really fundamental, and they become passports to future roles. So a lot of times what we see over time, let me just take a step back historically, is that jobs don't totally go away. Some jobs do go away, but many stay the same. They just evolve in terms of what skills are looking for. And right now what we're seeing is that evolution is a little bit more tilted towards digital literacy. And as I said, that fluency. But here's the really good news. One of the top most in-demand skills on our website are human skills. So there are things like compassion, communication, negotiation, problem solving, management, empathy. So these are skills no machine has, and these are skills you cannot, necessarily outsource to thousands of miles away. These are skills that they need for people right here. So what I would suggest is that people feel a little bit of optimism around opportunities that do exist. People are hiring. We just have to look a little bit harder. And I know it's going to be tough to navigate this transition of a massive unemployment shock, but there are jobs there, and they are looking for real humans to do them.
Well, Karen, as someone who lives in constant fear that a robot will take my job, I appreciate the insight and for breaking down the numbers for us here on LinkedIn News Live. It's always great to speak with you.
Thanks for having me.
That was our chief economist, Karen Kimbrough, talking to us about how you can think differently about your skills amid this pandemic. And now we're going to talk to an expert who's going to walk you through how to do just that. We'll be speaking with Gianna Giacopini. He is from Genpact. He's going to be joining us on the show right now to discuss how we can get ahead and what companies are doing right and wrong in the space. Gianni, thank you so much for joining us on LinkedIn News Live.
Hey, Carolyn.
All right, we just heard from Karen about how important digital skills are right now. How has the pandemic impacted that, and why is the future just digital, digital, digital?
Well, the pandemic has actually showed us that the economy functions virtually, and that means that we don't need to be in a physical environment to make things happen. Now, if you think about that and extrapolate a little bit, you actually understand that there's been a silver lining all along. I mean, we were going into an office, but sitting down and working on a computer. Now we work from our own office on a computer, and we work on business processes and processes in organizations that are very large. So we really work as networks of people. And I think interestingly, LinkedIn is that, right? It's networks of people that work together, and that is the job, right? And that's the reason why digital is important, because unless you understand how to connect people together, which is typically what you do through digital means, you can't make anything work.
And Gianni, I just want to say your last name one more time, because I hate when I mispronounce last names. It's Giacomelli. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Right, no worries. You're not the first one to butcher it. You're not the last one either, so no worries.
I apologize about that. All right, I want to get your take on something that PwC's Chief Innovation Officer said recently on this topic that we're discussing right now. He said off LinkedIn that before there used to be tech jobs and non-tech jobs. Now there are just jobs, and everyone needs to have comfort with technology. Gianni, this was a trend that we were seeing before the pandemic, but of course this has exacerbated that. What's your take on how we should be thinking about jobs right now?
I think that's true. I think it's important that, all of us at some point had to start writing emails. You remember there was a time in which you had senior people dictating emails to secretary, and then the secretary sent emails. Now everybody actually does that. And I think that's the normal maturation. The one thing that I think is even more interesting, though, if I may, Caroline, is that there's always been jobs that you had to do together with people, and there were jobs in which you could actually be alone. And I don't think that those jobs in which you are alone exist anymore. You're always with some other entity. Either you are with a network of people, or you are with a machine that is connected to a network of people. And that, I think, is going to be the defining trait of our jobs of the future. And that's the reason why we need to keep the human component as part of the digital understanding. Because at the end of the day, you're always going to work with somebody else. Somewhere else will touch the work that you do.
Gianni, I'm seeing more members joining us in the stream who I'm going to say hello to. I have Trisha from Virginia, Brady from New York, Tina from Houston, and Roger from Georgia. Thanks for joining us on LinkedIn News Live. We have some people joining us in the conversation. Yali says, transferring your skills to different role is key during the crisis. And Victor actually has a question for you, Gianni. He wants to know, what kind of skills can you boot up on to bridge the gap with these digital skills that we're discussing right now?
I think there's a misconception that digital is all about technology and people coding stuff, right? There's also certainly part of that, but a lot of technology is really about making an impact in the real world. So, for example, in my day job, apart from the work that we do at MIT, my day job, we actually run large operations, and people in those large operations very, very often don't code. They work on business processes, they work on really complicated things, and to do those jobs, you need to have a variety of skills. It's not just the coding. It is, I typically break it down between the tech-related things that, again, could be coding, but could also be agile project management. It could be design thinking. It could be something like of that nature. There's process-related skills that could also be program management, for example, or lean or process design. And then you have to have the domain, right? So if you do finance work, you do finance work. If you work in banking, you do banking. When you combine those things, you get digital transformation done. And so if you want to work with technology and you want to be relevant, you really want to be conversant in many of those things, so you actually bring them together and generate that business impact.
And this is forcing a lot of really big companies to having to upskill, this jargony word, upskill their workforce in real time. Amazon announced a $700 million initiative last year, PwC, $1 billion one. What are these companies doing right now?
So first of all, I think they're putting their money where their mouth is. And I think they're helping their people, which is out at the end of the day, the largest asset, to actually do things. In our own place, we've seen that this year alone, we have clocked about 10 million hours of learning. We are a company of about 100,000 people. The reality is that this needs to be driven from the top, right? So the CEO has to embrace this. It has to be one of the most important strategic initiatives that the company has. And then you need to put the resources behind. You need to put the human resources, but also the financial resources. And at the end of the day, it's actually about sending a signal to the workforce that they need to spend a significant chunk of their time reskilling themselves, learning has to be part of the daily or the weekly routine. Otherwise, there's a real risk that we will be left behind.
But Gianni, when I think about upskilling, I just picture all these individual workers in front of their computers and, getting a check when they learn some specific skill. But how does that actually lead to organizational change at scale for these companies?
So I think I actually put my MIT hat on this. That I actually disagree with that notion of learning. That is actually the way learning has happened for hundreds of years. The reality is that we need to work as part of collective intelligences, right? The organizations are collective intelligences, and all that really matters in your job is how well you can interoperate with other people and make things happen. So again, there's very little that we do individually, any of us, including the CEO. So how do you get skills and learn with other people, right? Because learning is actually almost a simulation, it's a dry run for the actual thing. And so you need to be good at interoperating with other people. Either, they can be coders, they can be designers, they can be anything, but you need to be good at that interaction. And the other thing I think is important is that the learning itself, the content itself, cannot just be content that you buy externally, that you take from some external place. Companies need to be able to contextualize that learning with the learning that comes from within the organization. So really harnessing the collective intelligence of the company itself, right? And matching it with, for example, content from LinkedIn Learning, because that's actually what connects the dots for adult learners. We know that, we've been out of school for a long time. We're not able to learn unless there's context in the things that we see. And so I really go back to the concept of collective intelligence, both in terms of us learning as being one part of that collective intelligence, but also really leveraging the collective intelligence of our organizations so that that learning is more holistic.
And I feel like before this pandemic, we talked a lot about the importance of being a lifelong learner, but that's definitely exacerbated this. Gianni, we have tons of members who are joining us in the stream who are trying to do this in real time. Say, transfer their skills from retail that's struggling right now to another industry. What do you say to them?
Well, I think this is a good time to do it because you have to. I mean, there's nothing better than actually a crisis to actually mobilize people. The other good thing is, look, for quite some time now, industries have been morphing into each other. There used to be a time in which people said, "Oh, I cannot hire you because you haven't been in my industry for 20 years." I mean, you've seen companies like Goldman Sachs going into retail banking. You've seen Apple and Amazon going into pretty much anything and everything. I mean, Microsoft itself, LinkedIn, learning. So the boundaries are blurring. So if they can do it, you can do it too. It's just that you need to find a toehold or a foothold by getting the skills right? So at the end of the day, you may not have all the skills that people in those companies have where you want to go in a different industry. But as long as you bring something that is valuable, again, if you're really good at the agile project management, or you're really good at program management in general, or if you're a good design thinker, it really doesn't matter if you don't have all the domain expertise. But the other thing that is really important is that you need to really be good at being a beginner. If you're a beginner and you're really good at it and you're able to ramp the curve quickly, you'll never have a problem.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because there are tons of misconceptions. And we know from research, women do this more than men, where they feel like if they don't have 100% of the skills for a job, they're not going to apply for that. We had a survey out on LinkedIn this morning that said that 84% of workers who don't have a job right now are feeling that that's a stigma, that they're unemployed. What do you say to those who are unemployed right now, looking at a job listing? They may not have all the skills, and they're also not feeling great about the fact that they're unemployed. How can they get motivated?
I think the latter is actually the bigger problem. Look, frankly, we are in a time in which confidence is actually half of the battle. So really want to work on that. And I think the best way to build confidence, some people were born confident and they'll never have a problem. But most of us actually need to have a foundation to build that confidence on. And I think learning is the best foundation. If you are able to reassure yourself that your brain still works, and your brain does work, you spend time learning. So you put the time behind that plan. You will be able to build that confidence. You'll be able to impress your future employers. But really, the step is spend time learning and really try to overcome your inertia. That's the only thing. Is actually the enemy is yourself. Is nothing else.
I think I always actually have to remind myself that my brain is still working. So I really appreciate that plug, Gianni. I have a fun one for you, actually. What is the skill that you have that you think is the most transferable? If you were to lose your job as, the chief at Genpact, how would you transfer those skills that you have right now into, say, something else?
I think I'm pretty good at learning from networks of people that don't look like mine. In my job as an innovation person, you really want to be ahead of the next curve, and you really want to be able to connect the dots between things that were, potentially not connected before. And I think that's one of the things that you learn over time. You push yourself out of your comfort zone. You periodically start learning and reading things that you really only understand 10% of it, and you do that with a certain amount of momentum. And that's one of the things that I believe, especially in a job like mine. I have a few more years of my career. I'm not 20 anymore, and I really need to continue learning again and again. And I think the best way is to really tap into networks where ideas propagate, and the ability to do that will always give you buoyancy.
I can imagine that you are actually very good at that from this brief conversation that we've had together. Before I let you go, I do want to hit on collaboration. You discuss in your research how important collaboration is to innovation. I'm really struggling collaborating with my coworkers right now in this new remote environment. How does the pandemic change how we think about innovation?
Well, look, innovation is based on serendipity. Very often ideas just ignite when people meet each other. And a lot of that is actually going away. You don't have a corridor, you don't have a water cooler, you don't really meet serendipitously. So that is the real risk. I think the one way to overcome it is just to force deliberate interplay between people, and really pick up the proverbial Slack channel and just connect with people. The other part of it is there are methods and processes in innovation that now need to translate into a virtual environment. I mean, you don't have sticky notes on a whiteboard anymore. You can actually have virtual sticky notes on a whiteboard. At the beginning, it feels a little contrived, but the advantage of that is that you really can harness the collective intelligence of the world. I mean, literally, I work with colleagues every day across the globe, from Japan to the West Coast of the US, and they are with me in the same meeting room. And I couldn't actually do that before. And the moment you actually overcome a little bit of the I think it's just a mental block. You actually start swimming in this opportunity for connecting with an incredible diversity of skills and intelligence out there, and it's just fabulous.
I definitely agree. I feel like even though we're in these little boxes, I do think it's going to be a talent equalizer overall. Gianni, we're having some members joining us saying upskilling is the reprioritization of skills we all have. We reassessed in deference to necessity. That's from Janet. And Nancy says, I'm definitely going to take on as many free trainings as possible. So you're inspiring some people. Gianni Giacomelli, thank you so much for joining us on LinkedIn News Live.
Thank you.
All right, that was Gianni Giacomelli from Genpact talking to us about how you can really transfer your skill set during this pandemic. I want to thank him, as well as our chief economist, Karen Kimbrough, for joining us on LinkedIn News Live. We're off from live programming tomorrow, but I'll be back with you on Monday to discuss the election and other topics important to the news next week. We'll be on at 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific. I'm Caroline Fairchild. Thank you so much.